Before we dig in, a quick thank you to the sponsors ready to grow with the Soil Sisters. Fed and Happy is the official nutrient provider for the Soil Sisters projects because we believe in the Fed and Happy philosophy that if the worms won't eat it, neither will we. And Tejas Tonic is the official beverage of the Texas Soil Sisters. We especially love that the hemp for Tejas Tonic is organically farmed in the Texas Hill Country, with farms in both Dripping Springs and Lukenbach, Texas. The Soil Sisters podcast is powered by B&P Electric. Whether you're building, remodeling, installing low-voltage landscape lighting, or in need of an inspection, B&P is your Central Texas electrical contractor. Find links to our sponsors in the podcast show notes or head over to txsoilsisters.co. It's planting season, and it's not too late to make sure your crops grow up fed and happy. Regardless of your spring crop, Fed and Happy offers a variety of worm casting solutions in liquid and solid form to supercharge your soil, your yields, and your profitability. For fast, vibrant germination and seedling growth, mix your seed with Fed and Happy's screened granular castings pre-drilling. The Fed and Happy liquid seed treat and extracts offer the ideal mix of soluble solids loaded with living beneficial biology, mycorrhizal fungi, humates, and more. The Fed and Happy small spreadable castings are ideal for fast, easy soil incorporation. The large offer long-term stability and soil growth. But you don't have to figure this out on your own. Just call 833-GO-WORMS to speak with our farm team experts for a fast turnaround on a custom solution for your needs. Fare better against pests, disease, drought, and other potential hazards this season with Fed and Happy worm castings. Visit fedandhappy.com for a healthy harvest and any lawn, garden, and tree care needs. Available for pickup and on-farm delivery. That's fednhappy.com or call 833-GO-WORMS. Happy planting. Hi, y'all. Welcome to the Soil Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister, Crystal. Hey, sister. How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I see a grin on your face ear to ear, and that's because we just got to have a site walk with our friend and hemp consultant, Lucas Evans of E3 Agriculture. Lucas, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just as important to have y'all be interested and passionate about this. So really pleased to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we are newbies to growing hemp in general. Really, we grew up on a ranch. Fifth generation, this has never been something that's been a part of our family's plan. You are a fifth generation farmer. We can't say we're farmers yet, but we're about to be. How did this journey come up for you? Is this something that you were just raised to be about the land, for the land?
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to talk about this. Any chance I get, I think it's important to tell. Grew up just outside of Austin on a family ranch or farm, actually, that you mentioned. When I was 9 years old, we started to sell off most of it because we weren't making any money doing conventional crops, and that has been the case ever since then. But just being and having fallen in love with that land and then watching it slowly get turned into houses and shopping centers and gas stations just was devastating to me. So from that point on, I'd always been looking a way to get back on the land, and how do we stay on the land and stay on the land in a way that the land provides for us, not that we build a gas station or chop it up and sell it. And so went to college, got a degree in environmental science, got radicalized, kind of saw the dilemma that we found ourselves in. And it's pretty obvious if you go in any direction in the country, right? It's corn and corn. And Taylor used to be the cotton capital, inland cotton capital of the world. And in the past 20 years, that's all been lost to Lubbock and other countries. And so we were desperate for a new crop. and that was about 2019 when I graduated and hemp became legal, and didn't really know much about it, and was fortunate to actually go to Germany to spend some time over there, where they've had an industry for 30 years, and kind of understanding all of the processes and offtakes and industries around that. And we were one of the first people to do it back in 2019, and have been trying to adopt that model here that really supports local economies, gives profit back to the farm, to the land. And hopefully if we can do that and make money, then we can stop exploiting it and building houses on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the Farm Bill passed, there were a lot of family farms, I think, that got excited about hemp, but then we didn't have the infrastructure for an industry yet, and I feel like a lot of them got burned. So when your family got started in 2019, what did that look like for you?
Well, that's, day by day, and it wasn't as much a family decision as it was mine, and the family supported me in that. And I thought that was important, to be an individual facing the realities of it. I think a lot of times people get a bunch of money together and they see a bunch of money and then they make money decisions. Whereas for me, it was like a personal decision, and like, can I survive doing this? And if I can survive doing this, then maybe I can support other people, and then eventually a community. And now I support probably 4 families.
Yay.
So
That's very exciting. So what did that look like to go to your family with this idea? Because I did the same thing. I don't know. I'm surprised now that we're growing 80 acres based on how that started.
Yeah.
Like, we came a long way. So what did that look like for you?
Well, unfortunately, we had sold the vast majority of our farm that would have been of commercial value. So we still have the family house and 5 acres, and that's in Hutto. And, it wasn't much to put an acre in there just to see how it grew. And so that was the first year, and it grew remarkably. And it grew way beyond my expectations. And from that moment, I was like, we've got something here.
Yeah.
And the second you kind of feel the stalk, you feel the properties of this plant, was just like, okay, I don't know how we're going to get there, but I know we will, because, we do a lot more with a lot less.
Yeah. So what did you do with that first acre of hemp that you grew?
Well, I water redded it and processed it all by hand. So I just looked up what they've been doing for thousands of years, and that's soaking it in water. I kind of make it akin to like barbecue, slow and low, let it soak in there, and then those fibers fall off the bone. And actually, if you go check out our Instagram, Texas Hemp Processors, at Texas Hemp Processors, you can see that first harvest and how these fibers just beautifully fall off of the stalk. So you have a very durable, refined fiber, and then a wood substitute, essentially, that could be used for building or paper. I actually initially wanted to do toilet paper. I just can't stand that we cut down trees.
Yeah.
And then they put chemicals all over the toilet paper that we wipe on our butts. Yeah, I hate that too.
Totally. So, but that was to get started, and I didn't know where this was going to take me. Today, we're focused on houses, building materials, and construction. That really came to me from the industry at large. And like I said, I was looking to make toilet paper, and then somebody's like, hey, you can build a house out of this. I'm like, really? And now we've done 12 houses in the Austin area.
Nice.
About to started our 13th, about to start our 14th. So
That's very exciting. And at the Texas Hemp Summit, you were part of a panel showcasing some of these builders. Are they growing their own, or are they just using your products? But they were beautiful homes, is I guess what I'm getting at.
yeah, so we coined the phrase seed to shelter. And it's funny, and I have some other people out here, like you mentioned early on, the infrastructure wasn't there. And so we started bringing in the seeds, planted them, harvested them, processed them, and took it all the way to the house. And we did that because we just had to. That's a beautiful thing that we'd like for people to adapt elsewhere, that they can actually grow their own home. But today, 5 years later, the economy's matured a lot. So now if you're a potential builder or somebody who wants to get in this space, you don't have to do the whole process farming, and you can just buy from people like ourselves at E3 Agriculture, or there's folks all around the country who will get you the materials to build with hemp.
So we are working with you on a project that we're doing here in Caldwell County, 4 acres of hemp that we'll be growing. And we're working with High Plains Hemp Gen on an 80-acre plot at our family's ranch in High Plains, just below the panhandle of Texas. So we're excited to have both of these experiences of the small cultivator versus like the big agriculture experience. I would like to talk through the process of what we've done with you, just from the consultation all the way through the process, to give people an idea if, they do sit on 5 acres of land, what this might look like for them and how they would get involved with somebody like you.
Yep, totally. So obviously it starts with a piece of land and a desire to do something with that. And I've certainly seen a wave of people wanting to get back on the land, and with COVID and people kind of getting back to wanting to be independent and support themselves. And so this is a growing interest and demand. And so obviously you've got to have a passion for it. And then, first looking at how much land you have, and that will kind of determine what practices you could apply to that. And then how much time, money, and equipment you have, right? If you've got a lot of money, not a lot of time, well, then that's one way. If you got a lot of time and a lot of money, that's another way. And to your point about, large scale versus something a little more local, I mean, my initial business plan was to make profit on about 20 acres. I think today the average profitable farm in America is 6,000 acres. And so how many people do you know that have 6,000 acres?
Yeah.
So hemp is a unique plant in that it has all these offtakes, and that it has, robust interest from medicine through clothing and recreational use even, and really has, I don't like the word hype, but, hemp, it gets people a lot more excited than, let's say, corn. And so
True. And I would like to actually interject real quick too, is that we're talking about industrial hemp. We're growing hemp that will be for fiber that will be used in clothing manufacturing out at the ranch. And then the seed that we're using here in Caldwell County will be for the seed and then the fiber that we would use for building materials. So even deciding, what you want your output to be, but that we're not talking about the medical hemp that people are, growing and using to then, make THCA flour or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Sorry, should have made that distinction. We don't really work with recreational or marijuana or consumables, so to speak. We're focused on industrial hemp, which cannabis sativa is a Latin term. But yeah, all of this stuff that we grow typically goes to either feeding humans and animals, which is what we're going to be doing here in Lockhart. And then the fibers of those plants going to clothing or washcloths. We made some washcloths with a customer last year, and then the stalk of that plant will be used for building. So you have one plot that can give you food, fiber for clothing, and building materials and housing. I don't know how many other plants can do that. It's really how much do you want to get out of this plant is really where it is, because you can go out there, you can put seeds in the ground, you can cut it and bale it and sell it by the bale and probably make your money back. But if you really want to get the value out of when you see these plants grow, you're going to see that this just is a beautiful specimen that was put here, what I believe, divinely, that can give us everything you need in really a small amount of space. Oh, and the bugs and the bees and the birds love it.
Yeah.
So.
And so does the soil.
And the soil. And if you look at look back at our Instagram and just the stories, that I have a post on there about, thinking as this industry came, and like I was trying to understand what it meant for us to have this new material, a raw material. And I use the example of oil in Texas. And oil by itself out of the ground is useless. It's only once you add value to it, you process it, do you start to get these materials from it. Whereas hemp, really, if you just put it in the ground and it grows, then it's beneficial to your soil,
Yes.
beneficial to the air, water quality, and you can sit under it for shade if you did nothing else, right? Then if you start to process it and get those value added products, that's when things get really interesting. So
Yeah. And sister, if you want to interject at any point, just interrupt me.
Absolutely.
Pretend we're at home. Everybody knows I'm the interrupter. Okay. So I wanted to go back because whenever I was talking about people wanting to get involved in this, you kind of threw out the scenarios that included having money, having land. So what about the person that doesn't have the equipment? They don't have any experience. I still feel like we can get into this in this 4 acres relatively inexpensively, starting this experiment for ourselves. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about that for the person that doesn't have the
Yeah.
John Deere in their garage.
no, I mean, I just encourage people to just get your hands on some seeds, put it in the ground, and as that plant grows, and bring people out. If it's not in view sight, then it's going to generate its own economy almost. And certainly, yeah, if there is, if you don't have access to land, we've got a farm that we always love to have people out at. There's a group called Blue Bonnet Mountains out of San Marcos, and they're a woman-led organization that does work in the cannabis space, and they help us harvest, they help us pull weeds. And like I said, with COVID, I mean, we have seen waves of people who really want to get out and get their hands in the dirt, and there's really no better therapy than to be in nature that way and to just be able to see this is where our food comes from. I hate money. It's only just something that enables activity, but that's the beauty of this plant, is that it's not something like you need an expensive computer or a truck and a trailer or a tractor. It helps, yeah, but we all know the stories of people making money on 2.5 acres, and that's without a lot of equipment. That's just seeds and a little bit of experience, and then the whole industry associated with that, from retail through processing. I think right now, if I were to encourage people to do anything, it would be to start making finished products with hemp, thinking about what you do with this fiber, what do you do with even like the micronized bioplastics, stuff like this. And we can get you the hemp, it's available, but like, let's really start to find out what we can do with this. We ran a study when we first got into this, like what would be the greatest value for industrial hemp fiber, or period, what would be the most highest value industrial hemp product. And it was carpets, hand-woven carpets.
Wow.
$6,000 is about what they retail, and it's only about like 45 pounds of hemp.
Yeah.
So you've got a loom, that's something you can do by hand. And there's a real thing where, like, how much time do you spend with it kind of equates to how much money is going to come from it. And those rugs are all done by hand in Nepal. But we worked with one of my partners, Elizabeth Kish. She helped us take our hemp fiber all the way to a clean fiber with really inexpensive equipment. Watched a bunch of old videos of how they used to do it in the 40s, and then got linked up with the San Antonio Weavers Guild, actually. And we were able to make washcloths with probably the first ones made in Texas in
I
like
love that.
100 years.
That's really cool. Yeah, I would like to go through and talk about all of the different products that E3 can create.
Yeah. So we obviously have our raw products. So grain out of the field. That's seed for replanting or grain for food. And then you've got raw fiber that typically would be sent to somebody to finish, or like we were talking about, you can take it by yourself to make whips, just for an example. But then we have the hurd, which is the stalk of the plant. That's often used for hempcrete, animal bedding, absorbents. We really sell those as finished materials, and that's for other people to buy and process in their own business. Then we have a few finished products that we take all the way to the customer. One of those is some polymers that we use, so some adhesives. We call it free epoxy. It's plant-based resins. And then we combine that with hemp fibers to make what we call fiberglass. So that's like a fiberglass replacement. And we...
Would that be like for insulation and stuff too, or fiberglass like that the car manufacturers are using?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
This would be more rigid. We are working on a kayak. So, and tables, chairs, stuff like that. So, yeah.
You have Lone Star Biochar on here.
Mm-hmm.
What is...
Yeah, so, being in agriculture, we also want to get in on the input side of this. We don't want to happen what's happened with every other crop, and that is it gets swept into the industrial agricultural giant. They start genetically modifying. Every farmer I've talked to, every major farmer I've talked to is like, oh, where's the Roundup Ready hemp?
Oh, God.
Yikes.
So we're
No,
trying to
thank
put
you.
up some backstops around that. And in this process, when we talk to landowners, we like to offer them sustainable inputs. And so we work with a local biochar producer here, actually not too far from Lockhart.
Yay. Good.
And then we have some Native American microbes that we also use to really kickstart that plant soil biology where, we always talk about you need to put inputs. We have to add material to the soil, but the soil supported a tall grass prairie for 15 million years or so. And so the soil itself, really, once you care for it, should give us everything we need year after year. It's just kind of a reframing that, and it takes time. It's not something that can be done the first year, but by the second and third year, you're really going to start to see the difference, and you're going to start to save money. And so we like to take a holistic approach, and really taking it from seed to sale or seed to shelter. That's really where you're going to get your most value. Certainly, as this grows, the people, and the economy will silo, and people will get more, do certain parts of this specialized. But I think that is kind of a rigid, old way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, and we received the buy-in from our dad about, okay, yes, do it your way. So we went out in search of organic inputs and had a call with one of those companies here in Texas. I won't say their name, but it almost felt like maybe they thought we were a couple of rich girls that had inherited some land and saying that they wanted to charge us $40,000 for the inputs. So when we talk about saving money and doing it in a conscious, regenerative manner, what are these inputs that people can get from you? Like, I feel like the prices and the things we were talking about, it's super economical.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, so I'm an environmental scientist, and what we use today for fertilizer is petroleum salt.
Yeah.
And so we literally salt our fields in mass, and then once the plant grows, we kill every insect that's on it. And that obviously trickles down, up and around into humans today. And so we don't entertain any synthetic pesticides or herbicides at all. There are some practices that you can use, mainly that can prevent the need for that. Hemp grows vigorously. I've yet to see, grasshoppers like it a little bit, but that's because there's not much grass for the grasshoppers. But yeah, we really just recommend manure if you really have lacking nutrients, and you can get that. We've got some people who use like horse manure in our area, but typically chickens, turkey farms, stuff like that. Biochar is obviously an excellent input depending on your soil type. Certainly, if you're in sandier soils, this is an ideal material. And then, always one of our biggest issues in the soils today is that we've been trying to kill them for the last 75 years. And we're only just now realizing the importance of that. And so, one example is if anytime you get a soil test, it'll give you a readout and it'll make recommendations to like, you need 50 units of nitrogen. And every year, it's like you need more nitrogen, but our atmosphere is 80% nitrogen.
Yeah.
And so how is it that nitrogen that's all around us isn't in the soil? It's because the soil is not living and activated enough to take that from the atmosphere and put it into a bioavailable packet basically for your plants. And so making sure that your soil biology is active, and you can test that. We, like I said, have some Native American microbes that would be happy to share with y'all. You can find them on our website.
And that's
Soil health.
e3agriculture.com.
Yep,
Okay.
e3agriculture.com. It's the materials are on there. It's best to reach out to us. Let us know. It's good to obviously get out on site and kind of see what you're working with, because every area is different, soils are different, elevation, and kind of really understanding your plot is really the most important thing.
Excellent.
I just want to make sure you didn't want to add anything when we're talking about soil.
Well,
before
I
started.
I love it because there is enough nitrogen in our atmosphere, and there is enough tied up nutrients in our soil, and you put life in that soil, and that begins to cycle. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're talking about. That's what we want people to understand. And I just love looking at you saying those same things.
Well, and we work with Texas A&M, and I don't think anyone had a malintent to get us in this position of monocultured crops across 80% of our agricultural lands. And if you go into today, I encourage you to, like, if you're thinking about doing this, get a soil sample, get it tested by your local ag department, extension, and then just take that to your co-op where they have the fertilizer and just have them tell you what you need. Because as we find these things out, we really do adapt, I think, most of the time. We're certainly kind of on a treadmill that's hard to get off of. But another example is I'm in like the Houston black clay, which is similar to what we're at here in Lockhart, or gumbo. It's rich soil. You open it up and it just smells like life. And it's obviously not lacking iron. But when I got my soil sample back, it came back and I said had an iron deficiency. And so I took it to the co-op, and they were like, oh yeah, we used to recommend people to throw more iron blood meal onto these crops, onto the land that already had it, only to find that it wasn't because it was bioavailable. So rather than adding iron, you added an activator, I think it was sulfur. I don't want to make recommendations right now, but yeah, so it's, really complex science that's going into this. And obviously you can reach out to us, but yeah, get in with your local ag community and they can really probably point you in a good direction. And then we always want them to hear more about hemp.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so recently our dad started forwarding us our county newsletters from the NRCS, FSA, whatever these different offices are. And they are local farmers that are writing these articles and talking about the native grasses and what's happening. So if nothing else, just start there, reading about what these other local farmers are talking about and what they're preparing for, and give yourself a year runway of putting a plan together and figuring out how you want to get involved, and then whether or not you're doing it on a small scale or a larger scale. Of course, 2 to 5 acres is always kind of the experiment. Mm-hmm. And then, we just happened to have these 2 plots that my dad was like, just go for it because of the drought, 2 years in a row, not a great wheat crop. And so there's nothing to lose, right, in this situation with us. And this program with the High Plains Hemp Gen, they are providing the seed, and then there's 3 payouts along the path for the farmers, because farmers didn't want to get involved because they were feeling burned. What we're talking about in these smaller plots, these may be people that are living in Lockhart. They're in town, but you can still do this stuff. You were talking about hand harvesting when it's on a small enough plot of land. In fact, I think you said 3 acres was enough to do a whole house.
Yeah, that's kind of the metric that we go off of and obviously we're in America. We love our tractors and our heavy equipment, but still today, the majority of food and fiber and materials are harvested by hand. So we, especially in Texas, we're akin to watching this huge $1 million equipment go down the road, but you'd be surprised what you can get done by hand, or, mule or even small equipment. So I don't want to get too doom and gloom here, but when we talk about the necessity or the interest of hemp, it's not something that we want to do. It's something that we have to do. Because like I started, we sold our family farm because we were growing all the conventional crops, and we were pretty good at it on some of the best land in the state of Texas. But because of, global competition of monocultured products, then you have climate change on top of that, which the last 2 years we had a devastating drought in the state of Texas. And the second year we grew was the worst drought in like 60 years. And it was our second hemp crop that we spent a bunch of money on, and it had been in a no-till field, right on, optimal lands. We didn't irrigate it, and we got like in 75% yield compared to everything else around us, which had died. And then the next year we'll actually beat the first year's drought record, and that was last year. And Williamson County actually was declared a disaster zone from the impact on farmers and farmland. They don't talk about that on the news because it's not, destructive enough, but it certainly was. And we have pictures of hemp growing green in August 15th, and your corn is broken over at 3.5 feet high, and most of that just got tilled under. And so, it wasn't an ideal crop for us, but we do all dry land, and hemp grows.
And that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We dry farm at the ranch. I remember when we were teenagers, my dad's best friend told him we had perfect sandy loam to grow watermelons. And so then all of a sudden we're picking watermelons all summer. And yeah, I'm glad to have a less heavy crop to play with this time. But yeah, it's just like, okay, we're dry farming. This seems like let's just give hemp a shot because it's less thirsty than the alfalfa, than the cotton, than the pecans, and whatever else.
Yeah, totally. And fodder for animals really is what it comes down to. Animals eat 7 times more food than humans. And what we were seeing in the Panhandle in Texas, it's necessary that we grow a plant that grows, period.
So right now we have to get our seed from other countries. We're sourcing seed elsewhere. I feel like you and I are on the same plane about finding people to become seed breeders in our state. What does this path look like? How do we promote that? And how can we help be a part of that?
Yeah, totally. That's really the critical piece. First the seed, then everything else comes. And we've done this before in the state of Texas. We've introduced a bunch of crops, and we've acclimated them to this region, and then we develop a specific seed that has the same traits over time. And GMO can be used in a lot of ways, but really just first getting one that grows here, period, and then having that isolated to a point where you can grow it. And it takes 7 years. That's just what it is across any board. 6 seasons or 7 seasons really. Texas, we only get really 1 season, maybe if you get down into far South Texas, but unfortunately you can't speed up the trips around the sun. And so that's where we're at. We're on year 4. So we should be having a Texas specific variety available next year. And then from that point, we can start to propagate that and develop our own domestic seed source. And that's really what's going to open this up to having a more consistent crop, but also just our sovereignty and food protection and supply chains and great old Texas independence.
Yes.
Amen. Okay, so when we talked earlier and we're talking about this Italian seed variety, and we can capture our seeds so that that's why I'm like, that's what I was going to ask. So you can't, because we have to register these seeds.
Yeah.
So that is like, if we're trying to do our own experiment for seeds that work for us, can we not do that because Texas A&M is doing it and it has to come through a government
No, so
entity?
if you don't know, we've outlawed agriculture.
Clearly.
In America.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is a crime against humanity. And so be careful when you get seeds from certain sources. Make sure that they don't, there's not a thing at the bottom that says, if you were to save these seeds, we're here to sue you and whatever. What you do with them after is not really anybody's business. But ultimately, the goal is to conduct agriculture, plant husbandry, where we aren't reliant on any company or any specific lawyer approving this, right? We are able to capture our seeds, save them, plant them next year. And so really you should only need to buy seeds maybe the first time. And then from that point, that should be your first offtake. Whatever's left over, you feed to yourself and your animals. And then you plant it for next year, and you grow and you grow. And so the seed is really one of the most critical elements that we need to protect, because something like 80% of the world's food supply is owned by 4 companies. And you can see how that could lead to some concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if you have a good crop and something is working and you're like, oh, this produced seeds from it's already starting to adapt to your terroir. So
Good word. Yeah.
So are we then to believe that, or is it the rules, if you are going to be involved in hemp farming in the state, that every time you are purchasing the seed from one of these seed banks that are available and registering it, it can't be that from a previous harvest that you've saved the seeds and now you can use those?
No, so that's really the beauty of this plant and time to be alive, I think, in this industry, is that in a way it's kind of the Wild West. Now, for Q4 supply chain logistics and stuff like that, okay, it gets a little murky, but the point is, there is no authority over this plant, and hopefully there will never be. We obviously want people to understand it, to provide good insight and advice around it. And there are organizations that do it. I mean, if you're interested in growing seeds to propagate, like I said, please reach out to us, reach out to the Soil Sisters. You need to have a scientific approach to it. It's not the easiest thing to do, and you do have to have some equipment to do it, if you really want to get in and help us make this. But it's something that has to happen. We've got to be able to make our own. And you said the word terroir. So, there have to be measures in place to ensure that we get a quality seed over time, and certainly to share and to spread. That's why it takes 7 generations to get to a point where it's the same thing over and over and you can bet on it. Now, how to get around that so that there's not a company that comes in here and buys it, I believe it's going to be something like you see in wine, where you have a terroir and it's basically a regionally based variety. Mm-hmm. And so that protects the region. You're able to market it as such, Brazos River Valley, let's say, or the Texas Hill Country variety. And like we have wine from certain regions, we're going to have hemp from certain regions. And there is not going to be a single company or even a couple companies that have control over this.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about family farm planning and, having these conversations and giving families an option other than to sell. Are you buying back any land currently? Or do y'all have some sort of a plan that's like, okay, this is where we want to be in 20 years?
Yeah, totally. So that's what we've done. We've gone back and bought more land now, and actually it's going the opposite direction. And that is in part due to this industrial hemp plant that we have committed to, capitalized on. We've found some success. I don't want to come out and say everyone should get in this and find success. Certainly have some, caution entering into anything. And I can tell you that if you're looking to diversify your farm plan, to get into a new economy and industry that like you might otherwise be pushed out of, if you're just growing corn year after year, like let's do some hemp.
Yeah.
At very least, it'll be something that will get you a greater pool of resources. It's not a pigeonhole, right? So like you can only do so many things with corn. So with this plant, once you kind of understand how it grows, and the first year, depending on where you're at, I don't ever recommend doing more than 2 to 20 acres. Even for large farmers, probably no more than 40 acres to start. But that's just so that you're not putting all your money out for this, right?
Well, and so, I guess our dad has a go big or go home mentality, but we also have the contract with the buyer. So, it's a risk-free thing right now because this is an opportune time to get into this. But for me, it's even, okay, our family's only grown cotton. Well, what if we do half cotton, half hemp, and you're, alternating the land in some way, just like basic ideas of how to just bring the conversation up. And the big thing that came up for us is, well, what new equipment are we going to need to have for this? And so just making sure everyone knows, okay, if we grow wheat or hay grazer, then we can grow hemp and not need any new equipment.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, we have yet to buy. We bought, because we do our processing on site, so we have a decorticator and separation equipment. But beyond that, we didn't buy any new equipment. So basic planters, sickle bars, and hay baler. And that's really all you really need to get into this industry if you're going to do it at scale. But yeah, to start the conversation, as a rotational crop, it's really a no-brainer. It improves your soil quality and your conditioning. It does take some nutrients out, so you want to get some back in, throw some microbes, or just till it back under, right? That's something you can always do.
Like even if it didn't work, it would be good for your soil. Even if it didn't do what you initially thought, or I feel like it's going to get people excited about farming again.
Yep.
Like to see a beautiful, big, 7-foot tall green plant, even in a drought situation, is just like, yes, like life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I felt the first year, and that's how I felt every year since. And you're going to have times in areas where it doesn't grow great, but more times than not, if you're planting at the right time and you get the rains, this plant's going to grow to be a robust, beautiful specimen that you'd kind of have to screw up not to make an economy around.
And as a 20-plus year gardener, stuff screws up all the time. Like, do you have 100? This is what my question is to all people who have a problem with it. Are you 100% successful in everything you grow every time, every year? Is that how it's been for you? Because that's not how it's been for me. So I'm open to trying stuff and it not being perfect and trying some more. And like I learned you had to kill it 6 times before you knew how to grow it as far as just any kind of plant in the garden or in your house. So it's just like,
Well,
it's
and
great.
yeah, and I mean, to that point, so germination rates. When you're going to buy seed, that's something to make sure you find out or do a test yourself is like, what's the germination rate going to be? And typically, I mean, today, I mean, something over 60%. That's minimum. Anything under that, you probably don't want to play with. Obviously, you're going to be buying half of it. It's not going to be, you're
Viable,
paying.
yeah.
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 So now, if it's what some of this corn is today is like 99.5%, that is because it's unnatural.
Yeah.
You're almost never going to find that in nature. And so somewhere between like 85 to 95% is a great range to be in. And then beyond that, it's up to you to make sure you care for that soil and you do the right rain dances mainly.
Yeah, right.
Well, and making sure that you are nurturing the life in the soil. If you feed the soil, if you nurture the life in the soil, it is going to benefit your plant. It's going to build soil structure. You know, if you, whatever kind you need, whatever soil you have, if you have life in it, it's going to be making it better. So that's my bottom line.
Well, and I think with something new, it also helps you build community because you don't really know
Yes.
exactly what you're doing. And so you start asking questions, you get more involved. I mean, there are a spattering of farmers around here I know that are interested. And it's like, okay, well, we know one person that has the equipment. So even creating your own community co ops around getting this done and helping each other cross the finish line. And if you don't have that community, the team at E3 Agriculture and Soil Sisters, we will help you make that community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
That's really what it's about, building the plant community and watching the people come around it. That's been the case since we got started. I mean, the first year we planted without expecting to make any money from the crop, and we ended up making more money from people coming out and taking maternity photos. And
Yeah.
we had a party for a retail store who wanted to get out in the hemp field and get photo shoots. And we do actually a lot of crop research on that, and so working with people and partners to prove the viability of the plant from the beginning. And so we, that's how you make a living in agriculture, E3 Agriculture. That's what we're doing. I got to pay myself and 6 other people, so we get pretty in the weeds, if you will. But yeah, there's a rich economy to be had here. We're just getting started on it. I encourage anybody to reach out to the Soil Sisters, check out our website, E3 Agriculture, and it's going to take more than a village. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate your time. Is there anything that we didn't ask that's important to include before we bow out?
I mean, personally, no, other than I'm just so pleased to know that y'all are out there and spreading this message and committed to the soil and improving farmers' ability to stay on their land. So.
Yes.
Yeah, it became very important for us. Our family sold roughly 10,000 acres of our ranch in the last couple of years. And that was something that I never thought would happen. And so it's the hero's journey. We're back and doing our part to nurture the soil and help bring our family back together in a more interesting, dynamic way where people are excited to come home and see what we're doing. And, our dad's 77 years old, and we're now having multiple calls with him a day, which, I don't call home that often. And then, of course, the other day we're on the phone like 4 or 5 times. He'd answer. I'm like, it's me again, Margaret. And he's just, so it's fun to be able to work on a project with our dad. And so hopefully this will inspire other people to get more involved in what's happening on their own family's land and not wait until there's a will and everyone's having to figure out what are we going to do with this and nobody knows.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you are inspired, I hope you will subscribe to the Soil Sisters podcast. Lucas, thank you for sharing your voice and your wisdom. He's an amazing hemp consultant. Again, that's e3agriculture.com. And you can follow his story from the very beginning on Instagram at Texas Hemp Processors.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you coming down here. Sister, as always, I appreciate you and all your knowledge and pulling this shit together that I just show up.
Amazing.
All right. Well, I hope y'all will show up for the next one. We'll talk to you soon.